Hello guys, today I want to show you how to install coilovers on your car, specifically for a Subaru BRZ, a Scion FRS, or a Toyota 86. And to get started, the reason I'm actually doing a reinstall, and it's because I had a lot of parts on my coilover seize up, and in this particular case, I actually had the rear bracket. It's just, we tried everything. We tried heat, vibration, soaking in PB Blaster. We did everything we could, and this bracket is permanently seized to this. And so for me to get parts off, I actually had to end up cutting off the damper. And you can see I have a box of lock rings here that we basically cut with a Dremel and then chiseled the spot to get them off. So I want you guys to have to avoid this because it's costing me a lot of money and a lot of pain in the ass work to have to redo the system. So what I recommend, and something that I'm doing with my system, is I took everything apart on my coilover, and I'm gonna go ahead on my bench grinder with the wire brush and clean up all the threads, all of the little corrosion that you see. I'm gonna do that for the hardware and the bearings as well. And then clean everything up, clean it really good with alcohol, and then anti-seize the crap out of everything. And I also recommend that I'm gonna go ahead and reapply the anti-seize throughout the year. I think the whole reason this happened was because I went an entire year, including a winter, with a lot of salt on the roads, and it just, you know, made it, all the corrosion and probably the loss of anti-seize just made everything seize up. You can see too, I actually finished the rears here. I was able to salvage them, apart from I did have to buy the new lock rings, but I have everything how I want it, and I applied anti-seize to the threads with a brush like this, and you can see I went pretty liberal on the anti-seize. And also too, before you get started, you probably want to have a general reference to what measurements you want to put these to. So throughout the year, I made adjustments to the preload and the ride height, and I kind of got to where I really liked it. So those are the measurements that I took here for you. Now this is assuming that you're using the BC Racing 8K spring rate springs for a coilover system, and I'm using the DS series, which I don't know if that makes a difference, but in case you know, have something similar, I am running the DS series. And the measurements that I'm working with for the fronts, I went 5 inches from the bottom of the camper plate to the bottom of this little plastic spacer here, and I did measure this with calipers to try to get exact as I could. And then for the rears, I did 5 and what's that, like 7/8. And the reason these numbers are so different is actually mainly because this is the front spring here, and you can see when I put it up to the rear spring, it's a lot shorter. So that makes up a lot of the difference that you see here between these values. And then for what's basically the ride height measurement, D2, which is again from the bottom of the camber plate to either the bottom of this lock ring or the top of the bottom bracket, I did for the front 8.5 inches, and for the rear 8 3/4. And then the last thing I want to mention is these numbers are going to change because this is before I'm getting a corner balance done. So this is just a general where I'd like to have the car before we go ahead and actually start changing the preload and the ride heights for the corner balance. All right, for the front coilover, what we're going to do is we have 3 nuts up top here. They use a 12mm socket to take those off, and then down below here you got 2 bolts to take off. Both sides take a 19mm socket, and you take that off. There's these wires that you need to just get a butter knife or something to just pop those off. You have for the brake line here, there's a 12mm hex head screw that's retaining that. There's an embedded captive screw, a nut inside the coilover bracket here, so that just pops right off. And then the last thing that I want to talk about is this guy is kind of tricky. Your sway bars might look different, but basically I need to get to this hex inside here to keep the end link from moving while turning the nut, and being able to do that with regular sockets is almost impossible. And then trying to use an Allen here and then like an adjustable or just a open-ended wrench is tricky because of this bracket and how these flange out. And I've seen people cut these, but what I've done that's much better is I got one of these tools from Craftsman, and it's just like a regular ratchet, but the hole goes all the way through. And what you can do is you can put that up like that, and then put your, if I can get it in there, you put your Allen in like that, and then this allows you to be able to actually turn the nut while still holding the end of the end link. But other than that, once you have all that apart, the rotor will come down a little bit, and you should be able to get this right out without having to actually mess with the control arm like we will on the rear end. So for the rear, all we need to do is at the bottom of the shock, there's a 17mm socket that you'll use to take this bolt, and on the backside there's a nut that you can take that out, and then this will not actually come out of the channel when you take that apart. So what I recommend is at the bottom of the control arm here is another bolt that also can be taken off with a 17mm socket. And when you take this off, then this entire thing is able to pivot down and will allow you to put your new shocks inside here. The only thing that's tricky sometimes is, depending on what your setting is of your sway bar, you may have to take that off in order to get the pivot action, or do the same thing on both sides of the car, and maybe you can get the sway bar to come down evenly. And then sometimes getting this back up, there's a lot of force to get it back in this position. I think it's easier when you're putting on new coilovers as opposed to the OEM ones. But what I might do is, I have a small jack here, and if need be, I will push down up in here and to get that to push up. And then to get the top to come off, it's pretty simple. All you do is go into the trunk here and use a 14mm socket to take these two nuts off.